A secure conference room on the third floor of the Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters holds 9 people on a Wednesday afternoon. Clearance level: top secret sensitive compartmented information. Subject: final coordination parameters for a joint military operation against Iranian ballistic missile production facilities and uranium enrichment sites. Codename: Crimson Hammer. Everyone in that room has been vetted at the highest levels. Everyone in that room has passed 5 separate background investigations over their careers. One of them has been reporting to Tehran for 3.5 years. The meeting concludes at 4:23 p.m. By 11:40 p.m. that same night, a detailed summary of Allied participation schedules, primary and secondary target prioritization, and the specific electronic warfare sequence designed to blind Iranian air defenses has been transmitted through a sophisticated communications architecture that terminates at an IRGC Intelligence Operations Center in a nondescript apartment building in Istanbul. Iran now possesses the operational blueprint. Iran now knows which of its facilities will be hit first, and someone inside the American intelligence community handed it to them. The discovery did not begin with a whistleblower. It did not begin with a foreign defector offering secrets in exchange for asylum. It did not begin with any of the dramatic triggers that espionage stories typically feature. It began with a software glitch. Routine maintenance on a classified network backup system generated an error log. The error log contained metadata from 11,000 file access events over a 90-day period. Standard procedure required a junior systems administrator to review the log and clear the error. The administrator noticed something. One user account had accessed the same restricted compartment 14 times during off hours in a 6-week span. All 14 access events occurred between midnight and 5 a.m. All 14 involved files related to a single operational program. Crimson Hammer. The administrator flagged the anomaly as a potential security protocol deviation. Expected resolution: improper handling of classified materials, possible administrative action, security refresher training. The flag was routed to the Counterintelligence Support Office embedded within DIA. A senior counterintelligence analyst reviewed the flag on a Monday morning. By Monday evening, the flag had been elevated to FBI headquarters. By Tuesday morning, a full counterintelligence investigation had been opened under the most restrictive classification protocols available. The individual under investigation was a GS-15 intelligence analyst with 16 years of federal service. 2 agency rotations. 1 overseas assignment in a NATO allied country. Performance reviews consistently rated as exceptional. 3 commendations for analytical excellence. 0 derogatory information in any security file. The analyst had been granted access to some of the most sensitive compartmented programs in the intelligence community. The analyst had been trusted by colleagues, supervisors, and oversight personnel for nearly 2 decades. The analyst had been working for Iranian intelligence since 2022. FBI technical surveillance teams obtained authorization under a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court order within 72 hours of the investigation's opening. The scope of the surveillance was comprehensive. All electronic communications, all physical movements, all network activity on government and personal devices, all financial transactions. The surveillance was invisible to the target. No access was restricted. No supervisors were notified. No behavioral change was induced that might signal awareness. The analyst continued reporting to work. The analyst continued attending classified briefings. The analyst continued accessing restricted files. And the FBI watched everything. What emerged over the following 22 days of surveillance constructed a case that counterintelligence officials would later describe as exceptionally well documented. The DIA analyst was using a personal tablet device to photograph classified documents displayed on a government workstation screen. The photographs were transferred to a cloud storage account registered under a false identity. The cloud account was accessed remotely by a handler operating through a VPN architecture that terminated in Turkish telecommunications infrastructure. The handler was IRGC Quds Force Intelligence Directorate. The communication chain was sophisticated. The operational security was professional. The tradecraft was consistent with Iranian intelligence training protocols documented in classified assessments dating back 7 years. But the DIA analyst was not the only node in the network. FBI analysts working with NSA signals intelligence support identified a second communication pathway feeding into the same Turkish terminus. The second pathway originated from a different source entirely, a civilian contractor employed by a defense technology firm with active contracts supporting Pentagon logistics systems. The contractor held a secret-level clearance, lower than the DIA analyst, but the contractor's access covered something the analyst could not see directly: deployment schedules, equipment positioning, transportation timelines, the operational logistics that would reveal when Crimson Hammer was actually moving from planning to execution. A third pathway emerged 4 days later, a former military officer now working as a policy consultant for a Washington think tank. The consultant retained professional relationships with active duty personnel across multiple service branches. The consultant had no current clearance but possessed something equally valuable: context. The consultant could interpret fragments of information and assemble them into coherent operational pictures. The consultant provided the analytical framework that allowed Iranian intelligence to understand what the other two sources were providing. 3 sources, 3 different access profiles, 3 different institutional positions, 1 coordinated network feeding 1 intelligence directorate through 1 handler. The FBI designated the network Shattered Mirror. The task force convened on day 14 of the investigation included representatives from FBI Counterintelligence, CIA Counterintelligence Center, NSA, and DIA's own security office. 7 people were fully read into the investigation. The compartmentalization was absolute. The reason for such extreme secrecy became clear when the task force assessed the damage. Crimson Hammer was not a theoretical planning exercise. Crimson Hammer was an active operation in final preparation stages. Allied governments had committed assets, strike packages had been finalized, electronic warfare sequences had been programmed. The operation was weeks from execution, and Iran, through the Shattered Mirror network, possessed enough operational detail to mount a comprehensive counter-response. The damage assessment identified 3 critical compromises. First, Iranian air defense commanders had received sufficient warning to begin repositioning mobile surface-to-air missile batteries away from predicted strike corridors. The element of tactical surprise that Crimson Hammer depended upon had been significantly degraded. Second, the identity of 2 allied nations participating in the coalition had been transmitted. If revealed publicly, this information could trigger domestic political crises in both countries, sufficient to force withdrawal from the operation. Third, and most urgently, a human intelligence source embedded within Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had been partially identified through the transmitted intelligence. The source had provided targeting data critical to Crimson Hammer's strike package. Iranian counterintelligence had narrowed the source's identity to a pool of fewer than 10 individuals. The search was active. The source's survival was measured in days. The task force briefed the National Security Advisor on a Friday evening. The following morning, Crimson Hammer's execution timeline was suspended. The intelligence source inside Iran was placed on immediate emergency extraction protocol. The arrest phase required simultaneous execution across 3 targets in 3 different locations. Any sequential approach created unacceptable risk. The moment one arrest occurred, the Istanbul handler would detect the disruption. The remaining sources would be alerted. Evidence would be destroyed. The handler would disappear into Turkish territory beyond effective reach. All 3 had to be taken at the same moment. The DIA analyst presented the most complex operational challenge. On the morning selected for arrest, the analyst was scheduled to attend a classified briefing that would provide updated Crimson Hammer status information. Allowing the briefing to proceed risked a final intelligence transmission. Excluding the analyst through any normal administrative mechanism risked alerting the analyst that something had changed. The solution required deception. At 7:15 a.m., the analyst received an official notification requiring immediate attendance at a mandatory security documentation review. The notification appeared entirely routine. It came through proper channels. It provided no indication of what was actually occurring. The analyst reported to a conference room on the second floor. The classified briefing proceeded on the fourth floor without the analyst present. At 7:42 a.m., arrest teams executed simultaneously. The DIA analyst was taken into custody in the conference room. No resistance. The expression was one of calculation, the expression of someone who had believed the operation remained invisible. The defense contractor was arrested in a parking garage adjacent to the contractor's workplace. A secondary team secured electronic devices from the contractor's office before any remote destruction command could be transmitted. The policy consultant was arrested at a residence in suburban Maryland. All three in custody within 8 minutes of the coordinated signal. In Istanbul, coordination with Turkish national intelligence facilitated surveillance of the IRGC handler's known locations. The handler could not be arrested. Turkish authorities would not permit direct American law enforcement action on their territory. But the handler's communication infrastructure was disrupted. The handler's cover identity was compromised to Turkish security services. The handler vanished from Istanbul within 36 hours. Current location unknown. The human intelligence source inside the IRGC was extracted under a separate classified protocol. The extraction operation was executed by personnel from another agency under another compartment. What the task force was told: the source was removed from Iranian territory before the shattered mirror arrests became known to Iranian intelligence. The margin was 9 hours. 9 hours between the source crossing out of Iran and the moment Tehran understood their network had been rolled up. 9 hours that represented the difference between survival and a death that would never have been publicly acknowledged. The source is alive. Recovered communications from the shattered mirror network revealed that Iran had not been collecting intelligence purely for defensive purposes. Iranian operational planners had been constructing an active response designed to exploit the intelligence advantage offensively. The response plan involved 3 coordinated elements. First, preemptive activation of proxy militia forces in Iraq and Lebanon, timed to coincide with Crimson Hammer's strike window. The goal was to create simultaneous regional crises that would divide American military attention at the moment of maximum operational commitment. Second, a targeted information operation against one of the participating Allied governments. The leaked intelligence identifying Allied participation would be channeled to sympathetic media outlets in that country. The goal was a domestic political crisis sufficient to force the Allied government's withdrawal from the coalition. Third, a direct counterintelligence operation against the identified IRGC source. The narrowed identification pool had reached 70% confidence on the source's true identity. Neutralization was imminent. None of these plans were executed. The network was disrupted before Iran could act. But the task force understood what they had prevented. This was not passive intelligence collection. This was the foundation for a strategic operation designed to collapse Crimson Hammer from the inside, using American personnel against American interests from within American institutions. Federal indictments were filed against all 3 Shattered Mirror members within 45 days. The DIA analyst faced charges under 18 U.S.C. 794, gathering and transmitting national defense information with intent to injure the United States. Maximum penalty: life imprisonment. In cases involving risk to human intelligence sources, the charge can be elevated to a capital offense. The defense contractor faced espionage charges under Section 793 with sentencing exposure of 25 years. The policy consultant faced charges under Section 951, acting as an agent of a foreign government, and Section 793, with combined sentencing exposure of 30 years. All 3 were denied bail. The arguments from defense counsel that these were long-time professionals with established community ties were rejected on grounds that the charged conduct demonstrated willingness and capability to act against national security in ways no monitoring condition could address. The Istanbul handler was indicted in absentia. The indictment will stand if the handler ever enters a jurisdiction with an American extradition treaty. That has not occurred. The Shattered Mirror investigation produced a systemic finding more troubling than the individual betrayals. The network had operated undetected for approximately 3.5 years. 3 individuals across 3 different institutional environments with 3 different security profiles had coordinated their collection for a foreign adversary. None of the existing detection mechanisms had flagged the activity, not because the mechanisms were absent, because the network had been specifically designed to avoid them. Each source maintained a clean behavioral signature. No financial anomalies, no suspicious foreign travel, no contact with known intelligence personnel, no lifestyle changes inconsistent with documented income. Iranian intelligence had recruited sources capable of surviving scrutiny, trained them in operational security, and distributed the intelligence signature across multiple individuals so that no single person's behavior would cross any detection threshold. The network was not discovered because the system caught them. The network was discovered because a junior systems administrator noticed a software glitch. A backup error log. 14 after-hours access events to the same compartment. One anomaly that could have been dismissed. One administrator who decided to flag it instead of clearing it. That decision is the only reason Shattered Mirror was found when it was found. Crimson Hammer returned to active planning status 8 weeks after the arrests. The coalition architecture was reconstructed. The compromised allied partnerships were re-engaged through a revised coordination framework with narrower access. The operation proceeded. What happened next remains classified. The 3 defendants await trial. Legal proceedings in espionage cases of this classification level are typically extended by evidence handling requirements and the need to protect sources and methods. The DIA analyst has made no public statement. No explanation has been offered for 16 years of trusted service ending in betrayal. There are no dramatic revelations in counterintelligence cases, no speeches, no confessions that make the betrayal comprehensible. Someone trusted with the nation's most sensitive information decided to sell that information to a hostile foreign power. The reasons will emerge at trial or remain unknown. What will not emerge at trial is the name of the human intelligence source extracted from Iranian territory 9 hours before the arrests became public. That person lives now under a different identity in a different country, with the permanent knowledge that survival came down to a backup system error log and one administrator who thought an anomaly was worth reporting. 3.5 years. Estimated operational duration of the Shattered Mirror network before detection. 3 members arrested simultaneously across 3 institutional environments. 1 IRGC handler indicted in absentia, location currently unknown. 16 years of federal service accumulated by the primary source before discovery. 9 hours between the human intelligence source's extraction and the moment Iran understood the network was compromised. 2 allied governments whose participation had been identified through leaked intelligence. 22 days of controlled surveillance conducted before arrests. 8 minutes from coordinated arrest signal to all 3 defendants in custody. 14 after-hours access events that started everything. 1 software glitch. 1 administrator who flagged it. Everything else followed from that. That is what counterintelligence work actually looks like. Not the arrest, not the headline, not the coordinated takedown across 3 locations in 8 minutes. It starts with 1 anomaly and someone who decides it matters. That is all. That is everything.